So thank you everybody for coming. This is a long time overdue. We're really excited to be able to honor our former executive director, Fergus Watt. It's surprising to me. I've known Fergus for, I guess it's 10 years now, which is wild. And I think I learned about World Federalism before I met Fergus, but I guarantee you I would not still be a World Federalist if it wasn't for Fergus. Definitely a longtime friend and mentor of mine, and really excited to be able to honor him here today. So I think we're going to go through a few speakers that wanted to give some remarks about Fergus. And I think we're going to start off with some introductory remarks from our current president, Karen Hamilton, who's going to deliver them on Zoom. So Alex and Erica, let me know if I can do anything to ease the hybrid aspect of this. But I'm going to mute the microphone now, and we're all watching you on screen. So we've got about 15 people in the room here, and ready to hear what you have to say, Karen.
All right, thank you so much, Nick. And thank you so much. Before I begin, I need to begin by thanking Alex and Erica and everybody who has put together this conference. It's been amazing so far, and I know there is much more to come. And thank you so much for the education, for the engagement, and for the ways in which it fulfills and speaks to what we're trying to do as World Federalists, building a world community, principles of international cooperation, peace, justice, democratic global governance, federalism, subsidiarity. Thank you so much, Alex, Erica, and everybody else. Now, also, before I begin, thanks to so many of us who've been working on this event, Fergus, for a very long time. It's been a while since you decided it was time to move on to other incredibly vital work and to no longer be the executive director for the World Federalist Movement. And we started planning this a long time ago. And then there was COVID and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're finally here to thank you for decades and decades and decades as the executive director of the World Federalist Movement. Now, the thing about saying goodbye to Fergus is that Fergus doesn't exactly ever go away. So he's still with us, and he's still engaged in incredibly vital work. And I just quoted to you what it is we all do together, the building of a world community. Principles of international cooperation, peace and justice, democratic global governance, federalism, subsidiarity. And we're going to talk about all of those things. But I do have to tell one Fergus story. There has to be one Fergus, because there are so many I could have picked. But this one particularly spoke to my heart. So, Nick, you just mentioned how long you've known Fergus. And my story is kind of entirely a little bit similar. So 29 years ago, I had just joined the World Federalist Movement, and we were holding a joint WFMC meeting in Toronto with the Americans. Remember that, Fergus? And I was in Toronto, living in Toronto, brand new to the organization. So I thought, well, I'll volunteer to help, do what you can, get in right at the beginning, be helpful. So I did a lot of the organizing. I was on the spot. Fergus was in Ottawa. It was a great privilege. The last minute, Fergus and I were wrapping up some details, and we were standing, and I still remember this, Fergus. We were standing on Yonge Street, waiting for the light to turn as we were going to cross the street, as we were continuing to talk and meet and put the last details together for the conference, knowing those Americans were coming. And so I asked about a number of pieces on the agenda, and I asked particularly, because I knew this piece wasn't quite complete yet, about the nominations. And I asked particularly about the vacant position for council chair. So, and those of you who know Fergus so well can just imagine exactly how this moment went. Fergus said in Fergus speak, well, actually, I put your name on. 29 years later, I'm still with the movement, having been elected council chair the next day, EC chair, and I've been, of course, on the international executive. Now, I know that, Fergus, you really want us to speak about world federalism and to really continue forward in the work that we are doing and to make it even more obvious and visible in the world. And so I'm going to do just that in the minutes remaining to me. This is kind of an altar call, knowing how much you love religious terminology, kind of an altar call to world federalism as we thank you for decades and decades of faithful work that is ongoing. So Fergus, this is about you, but it's also not about you. And it's about how we go forward and how you have taught us, encouraged us, and inspired us to go forward. So about being world federalist in the world, it's about persistence. It's about tenacity and vision. It's about building relationships and coalitions with like-minded organizations and people and putting the time into maintaining them. Fergus, you did all of that. You do all of that. It's about believing in what it is we believe in. It's about believing that in spite of how things look, and sometimes in the World Federalist reality, or the World Federalist ways in which we frame the world and believe that the world can indeed be a better place, sometimes things have looked better, and sometimes things have not looked better. But it's about continuing to believe in it, and then rolling that persistence, tenacity, vision, relationship building, coalition building forward. And we love words as World Federalists. And Fergus, your words, your writing have been profoundly inspiring, and we're all called to do the same. We have our publications, we have our listservs, we have our discussions. But it's also about doing. And that's what you have manifest. And we need to be, and we are inspired by that. So much of what you did, Fergus, most people will never know. But you did it with tenacity, and you just kept right on going and doing the tough, kind of in the trenches sort of work that needs to be done in order to build a vision and in order to build world peace. You continue to do that work. You continue to follow through with the details, make the calls, send the emails, write the documents, do the building, and push the work forward even when it's hard. And that's the altar call for all of us. Your focus on the UN Charter, World Federalist focus on the UN Charter, our research, education, advocacy, our development of a democratic world federalism based on World Federalist principles is very deep in you. And we are all inspired, challenged to go forward with that. Since 1947, World Federalist Movement, since that ending of the Second World War, there's been a vision of a better world. Let's keep on that vision, and let's keep on fulfilling that vision with the credibility. I think, Fergus, if I had to think of one word to sum up all that you've done, all that you are, all that you continue to do, all that you will continue to do, it's about credibility. When you speak, people listen. May it be so for the rest of us. Thank you, Fergus.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, I should have unmuted the mic so you could hear the applause, but your remarks were very well received. I think our next speaker, Jim Christie, I think he's having a little trouble joining the Zoom room. I got an email from him. I see.
I was. The gods of the internet were not kind to me.
Okay.
The true faith prevailed, and I'm bloody well here, Nick.
Wonderful. Okay, good to hear. All right, I'll turn it over to you then.
Well, first of all, Karen, thanks. Always good to hear you speak and always good to hear of those reflections. Uh, so, first blind sage notes that the elephant is a wall. Well, would you expect if the sage happened to run up against the side of an elephant? The second sage, having found the trunk, said, "Ah, but the elephant is like a snake." The third sage, having bumped headfirst into the elephant's leg, said, "No, my friends, the elephant is a tree." And the tail end Charlie amongst the sages found the elephant's tail and said, "Oh, no, you're all wrong. The elephant is like a rope." Fergus, there are more facets to you than even to the best endowed elephant. 43 years. Have you been counting, Ferg? I don't usually, because it reminds me of how far along life's journey I've already come. But Fergus and I have known each other for 43 years. I remember climbing up those stairs on Elgin Avenue to the second, or was it the third floor, Fergus? Memory fails me at the moment. Third floor, yeah. And there was you. Actually, there was Duncan. And there was, oh my gosh, the ever present in the front office. I want to say Eileen. Is that right? That's not right, is it? I can't hear you, Fergus. The mic's off there, but nevertheless, it was the guy in the back room that fascinated me. He was a little younger than I was, but not hugely, although he seems to be catching up in recent years. And I was impressed with the guy. He was busy putting together the, let me see now, the Canadian World Federalist at the time, I think we called it. He's had quite the time, not only with Canadians in the World Federalist venture, but of course, worldwide. I remember a beautiful starlit, clear and starlit evening in a little town called Pavia, 34 years ago, sitting down to dinner with a group of Italian and international colleagues, including a friend of mine from the KGB, but that's another long and sordid story. And the first question at the table was from Lucio Levi, a colleague of many of us, and his first remark was, "James, how is a Fergus?" How is a Fergus? If I could count, or perhaps have a $5 bill for every time people on encountering me have first asked how Fergus is, I would be an extremely wealthy person in my quasi-retirement these days. There are, as Karen said, so many Fergus stories. For instance, Fergus, just out of curiosity, called any good bingo games recently? Perhaps we'll let that one slide. But really, today is to speak about Fergus as a World Federalist. I want to do that. I want to do it by just acknowledging, first of all, something that people tend not to think of World Federalists as. You got to be a clear-eyed, hard-headed realist to be a World Federalist. Oh, I know the traditional image is of a group of ivory-towered visionaries from those who like us, and simply lunatics for those who think perhaps that's what we are. But you got to be hard-eyed and you got to be hard-headed. To be a World Federalist, one has to see the world as it is and people as they are and be willing to work with that no matter what it takes and no matter where it takes us. And for essentially the last 40 years, more than a generation, Fergus has been doing precisely that. When Fergus and I began to get to know each other as World Federalists, we found that we had a good deal in common. And one part of it was that although we honored the founders of the movement in Montreux in 1947, after all, some of them were the most extraordinary people on the planet in the middle of the 20th century, we were also joined by a conviction that the United Nations, bless it, just doesn't and didn't, and perhaps won't, ever work the way we thought it ought to. World Federalism is a way of taking a look at the grim reality, which is much of life, and finding ways to somehow not circumvent, but to work with the reality to achieve something that we have only thus far barely imagined. And yet Fergus was absolutely convinced that what we needed so much wasn't another voice in the peace movement in general, but rather, and most and more particularly, we needed structures for peace. And I'd like to remind the World Federalist Movement in Canada of Fergus's engagement in some of those structures. In fact, the first engagement I want to remember goes back to the 1980s, and that was, in fact, the attempt to establish structures for peace. There are conferences hither and yon and in Washington and beyond, with the principle that Federalists know. Peace is not going to emerge because we wish it to emerge, because we want it to emerge, because, well, to go back to one of Karen's comments, at least implicitly, because we're going to pray for it to emerge. Peace will emerge not because people lay down their arms, but because they believe there are structures and mechanisms and law in place in order to make it possible to live together, people being what they are. Fergus was key in implementing those initial attempts. He was key in many ways too, in the support for Anne McTaggart and her Our Planet in Every Classroom in the late 1980s, a tangible way in those pre-internet, pre-Twitter, pre-Facebook, pre-X, pre-Instagram, pre-TikTok days, where you could actually place a photograph of the planet from space, which NASA provided to Anne McTaggart, out of the goodness of their vision. And Anne decided she wanted to take this worldwide and across the country so that young people could actually see the world as Fred Hoyle suggested they might be able to see it back in 1944, and that it would change hearts and minds, if not the immediate world. Fergus was key, of course, in the ongoing work that established and maintained the Coalition for the International Criminal Court. And not content with that, he grasped the significance of the vision for the responsibility to protect and worked on that and shepherded that project. The vision of part of Lloyd Axworthy, captured in some measure by the Dutch and promoted at one time when Canada actually was interested in the world around us, by the Canadian government as well. And then, of course, as he moved on, there was the kind of world we want, the kind of UN we want, and the one for then 7, now I suppose 8+ billion, which was the campaign to make the choosing of a SecGen more open, more transparent, and more significant. Of course, Fergus wasn't all philosophy and policy, although he was awfully good at that. How many years did you chair the various policy committees, Ferg? Yeah, I know, that was my thought too, both Canada and internationally. But Fergus was also a hell of a lot of fun. I mentioned bingo. I will let Fergus pick up on bingo. I remember one, as I recall at the time, vodka-soaked flight with Worldways. For those of you who never had the opportunity to fly Worldways Airlines, it was both a clarifying and terrifying experience, rather like Dr. Johnson's observation that nothing so focuses a person's mind as the knowledge that they are to be hanged in the morning. It was a good flight. Well, the second flight was when Fergus actually went home to Ottawa to get his passport and then flew out of Pearson to join me in The Hague. We had long discussions about those little white dots in the ocean, finally agreeing, with help from the flight attendant, that they were icebergs. I don't know. How many cities? How many bars? How many times together? And perhaps none of us will ever forget soggy bun fights. I just saw a note flash up that Nick Christie is somewhere in the chat. Nick is related to me in the same way that Owen is related to Ferg. When did you get old enough to grow a beard, Owen? I mean, seems to me I've known you since before you were even imagined. And it's good to see you again today. Bentatene is one of those odd places where much happens, much that's good, great reflection between the European Federalists, World Federalists. Of course, the dining facilities were something a little outre. The tradition in the south of Italy was to drop a dragnet into the Bay of Naples, scoop up whatever could be found and dump it on a plate so that it looked like something from Jurassic Park. Octopus on toast to find it grated thin, and I think it was actually Fergus who hurled the first soggy bun at the head of then 10-year-old Nick Christie to cause the room to erupt into chaos. Well, I don't know. I'd love to go on. I'd love to go on because in those 43 years, Fergus has provided me with one of the richest and steadiest friendships. Friendship in the sense that C.S. Lewis used to say, friendship isn't necessarily about agreeing. Hard to imagine, but Ferg and I haven't always agreed over 4 decades. But rather, when two people or more find the same thing important to them. And the future of this troubled and yet wonderful planet has always been important to Fergus. And it's been important to me. And we've had a lifetime taking runs at how perhaps we can contribute in some small way to keeping the planet going and its peoplehood going. H.G. Wells was, in many respects, perhaps among the very first World Federalists, although Karen Hamilton's beloved Dante probably takes credit for being among the very first. Wells, in the almost epilogue to Tonneau Bungay, once wrote that we are all creatures who make and pass. Those were words that Frank and Gip Wells used when they scattered H.G. Wells's ashes in the English Channel following his death in 1946. We're all creatures who make and pass. Fergus, our time is in some measure passing, but what you've made is a foundation that just may be unshakable, not simply for our movement, but for the sake of the entire planet. Your passing, of course, is not yet come, and I hope it won't come for a long time. But your sojourning amongst us has been like the experience of, well, often understated, I know, but really a mighty rushing wind that shifts and moves and shakes the very foundations of our preconceptions and pushes us just a little bit further along the way of the human project. Congratulations, mate. Well done. Keep it up, right?
Well, thank you very much, Jim. Our next speaker is Bill Pace. If you're there, Bill, I saw you earlier, so.
I think, let's see. Am I able to be heard at this point?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Well, for the many of you here that probably don't know me, I should introduce myself briefly, as I was the Executive Director and General Secretary of the International Movement, beginning informally in 1989 and then more formally in 1994, and retired in 2019. So Fergus and I have overlapped for literally decades, and I am delighted and honored to offer my appreciation and comments on the occasion of WFM-Canada's celebration of Fergus Watt's, quote, contributions to world federalism. And it's very good. It's a little daunting to have to follow Karen and Jim Christie, but I'll do my best, and I am, as I say, very, very pleased to have been invited to offer some comments. Fergus has been, I believe, one of the most effective planetary citizens I have known in the last 35 to 40 years. His and WFM-Canada's support to the international movement in the executive committees, in the councils, in the congresses, in the Assembly of State Parties has been indispensable. even with excellent contributions from important WFM member organizations, including the US and Japan and the European groups, WFM Canada provided, in my view, the most comprehensive programmatic contributions to virtually all of the WFM programs, from the UN Parliamentary Assembly project, which was based on an excellent proposal written by Dieter Heinrich and Kit Pinot, who were Canadians in charge of the office across the street from the UN and the Church Center, to the broad UN reform initiatives on disarmament, on trying to discourage the terrible mistakes by the US and others in war, on supporting European federalism, on the strengthening the World Court, on establishing a new World Court, the International Criminal Court, on strengthening the General Assembly and the Economic and Social Council, on the successful organization of the Earth Summit in 1992, the multiple world conferences of the 1990s on human rights, on the advancement of women, on the social development, sustainable development, on the UN Decade of International Law, on our organizing with other key groups, the Hague Appeal for Peace in 1999, with over 10,000 NGO participating in that meeting that happened at the time of the wars in the former Yugoslavia, on helping engage Lloyd Axworthy as foreign minister and as an actual officer of the international movement strategically for more than 20 years, on working with Canadian UN ambassadors and other diplomats in the most strategic way that any of our member organizations were able to engage their foreign ministries and prime ministries and government officials and parliaments. As Jim mentioned, on our creation of an international coalition for the responsibility to protect. Also, he mentioned the historic 1 for 7 billion, now 8 billion campaign to reform the procedures on the appointment of the Secretary General by the General Assembly and the Security Council. On being, Fergus, the most, and WFM Canada, the most strategic in advancing and working with small and middle power governments, often called like-minded groupings. And it is these groupings that are the primary pillar, in my view, for achieving global peace and disarmament, for overcoming the terrible misuse of the veto and the paralysis of the permanent members of the Security Council, and in developing enforceable global democracy, world laws, and institutions. The UN we need indeed. While as General Secretary for WFM, I had hundreds of great WFM members, great support from staff, and great cooperation of NGO colleagues. I can say none exceeded the support I received from Fergus Watt as the Executive Director of WFM Canada. And I have to say, in a little sadness, that in the daily, in doing now without the daily, weekly, yearly support and advice and counsel I received from Fergus, my effectiveness has plummeted enormously since retiring. And of course, with the pandemic and the disastrous US and world politics, But Fergus, I'll end as I began. I want to congratulate you and thank you, and of course, thank your wife, family, staff, and all who supported Fergus as what I believe was one of truly the world's most effective planetary citizens in the last 40 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bill. And for the next 2 minutes, instead of listening to me and looking at me, I would prefer the people in the room go outside and get some food that's on the table and snacks. And you can do that right now. So another way you can thank or celebrate Fergus, and I think a way that's one of the most meaningful things to do, is to donate to the World Federalist Movement Canada. And the people in the room, they can find links to that on the tables, but the people joining online, if you just go to the website on the donate page, it's very easy to do. We have a link in the chat now, so that's a great way to do it. A great way to continue the work that Fergus has put so much of his life into. We'll hear from Fergus in a moment, but before we do, I think Christine and Patricia, I think we have some tokens to recognize Fergus. Yeah.
Special token.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. I'll just all right, sounds great.
Okay. So when you announced that you would be retiring from WFM-Canada Executive Director.
I need the microphone so that.
Oh yes, talking to the
Talk into the microphone, okay. You can see, feel, it's most important that you see Fergus, so.
You're very.
You go ahead.
Well, I'm talking to you, okay. So we decided, we all got into a virtual huddle, of course it had to be virtual at the time, to decide what to do. And one of the ideas we came up with was to gather comments from all your colleagues and friends and put it together. So because we've been menu delayed, people managed to get quite a few things in for you.
Oh, my goodness.
So there you go.
Don't believe everything you read.
After these speeches, I won't.
So this is a special booklet called Fergus and the World Feds. And when he feels nostalgic, he'll be able to simply pick up the book and wander through it. Many comments from many of you. So.
Oh, this is great. Thanks very much.
Chris had something to add to that.
It's one of my grade 1 artwork.
Yeah.
So this is a gift that I got from the Guild, and that's purchased on behalf of the World Federalists. And just want to say, I hope that you and Michelle will enjoy it. And there is something inside the paper bag.
So I open that.
Why not?
Thanks. Well, while I'm opening it, I did include in my remarks, thanks to Christine and Patricia for also organizing an event with Monique.
Oh, that was.
Who stepped down from the organization around the same time as I did. And I was really glad that you got it. And the Montreal branch did that.
They gotta keep looking.
So, yeah. Oh.
Sort of like that. It's and then you get to that. So it kind of is the representation of, it's a representation of the world, sort of.
And is there?
It's an Inuit, it's a, what do you call it? It's a. Numbered.
A numbered, wow.
Anyway, just thought it's something that you put on your wall and admire that the fact is. it's
Yeah.
represented.
Yeah,
Maybe.
for those who know us, Michelle and I rarely agree on art. We do have some art on our walls, but it's either her turn or my turn This is more like my kind of thing, and I do like it, and thank you very much.
So Nick, do we go and get something?
Yeah, I would say this is, Fergus is up next, so who knows how long.
You could be here all night. Please. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so folks on Zoom, this will be just a few minutes. Thank you for your indulgence. Feel free to get yourself a beverage or a snack or use the washroom.
Oh, there, that's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Did you choose them? Yeah. Absolutely beautiful, yeah, that's. Into the guild. Well. Sort of indigenous art, it's mostly Inuit artists and. Did you go online or is there? No, yeah, right here, the Musée des Beaux-Arts. Oh, okay, so they're real. We're going to my son.
And I've got one more thing for the wall that's mine and not his.
Stimulate, make the wall, decorate.
I'm just curious, are the mics still open?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great. I just wanted to mention something that call it an observation. I wanted to check my observations actually with Fergus. As I look around the screen, I noticed that amongst those of us who are gathered, that Karen and Bill and Fergus have barely changed since I've known them. That's collectively well over a century of years, and it fascinates me. It's as though there's a portrait in each of their attics. For those of you literary fans who remember Oscar Wilde and his creation, Dorian Gray. But the other thing that fascinates me actually is looking at the faces on the screen is how many of you are much younger than those who Fergus and I worked with. Excellent people, bright people, brilliant people, with of course a healthy dose of crazies to keep us honest and on track. But this is a young looking group that I see on screen before me, and that's fascinating. And I gotta say, I couldn't be happier. Some of us are veterans, a little long in the tooth, but my goodness, this is not the same WFM as it was in 1981. But I need to check that perception with Ferg and possibly with Karen, and maybe with Bill, although I can't. Oh yeah, Bill is still there.
James, it has something, Jacobo, it has something to do with the fact that this celebration of Fergus is set within the context of the conference. The conference attracts a very young crowd, and that's fabulous.
That's great. Yeah.
And like all of us, Alex has poured a great deal of work into the World Federalist Movement Canada, and this is one of the pieces that that you're seeing before you, and you're seeing some of the impact of that. That doesn't mean they're on the board necessarily. It doesn't mean they belong to branches, but they are engaged in the conversations, which are highly significant.
Well, you know, just as we banter a little bit while folk are getting refreshments, I'm not all that concerned with who's on the board, though I'd love that to be a great mix always. I think what I'm concerned more about than anything is that there are people who are talking about and still interested in world federalism. When Dwyer, quoting both Sherlock Holmes and Plato, and Aristotle rather, once said that once you've exhausted all of the other alternatives, the one that is left may actually be that. And I paraphrase, but I think that's correct. And to see young people,
and there was a conference last year, and so the conference has a lot of momentum. Great kudos.
The only other observation from age, if not wisdom, is that the World Federalist Movement is not an end in itself. I mean, I sincerely look forward to the day when we retire, not individuals of caliber as Fergus, but the whole movement, because we've actually achieved our goal. Now, God only knows when or if that'll come. Any number of things can happen. But really, the World Federalist Movement has always been intended to me a midwife for something much larger and much more powerful and much more significant than anything that we've done, even anything that Fergus has done. Anyway, I wish the conference well. It's almost tempting enough to join you the next time.
Yeah.
We invite you to.
Well, thank
Hope you do. Yeah.
Well, one of these days.
What's on tomorrow?
Tomorrow, I am actually on deck. Karen, you still preaching much?
Sometimes. Just preach at the baptism that I also did of grandchild number 3.
Congratulations. I'm not quite sure why I'm flavor of the month. I think it's multiple retirements and a good deal of sickness and death, but I find myself more popular than perhaps I was even during the peak of my pulpit prowess. Bill, how's Lydia?
Oh, Lydia is downstairs watching Dutch television and enjoying herself. But I mean, unfortunately, the Netherlands has elected a extreme fascist that may become the next prime minister. So she's following those politics the same way I'm following the very dangerous politics of the United States this year. So
Ours are reflectively dangerous in this country too, you know, Bill. We're all suffering from this peculiar drift to the right. And, not always a reason. Perhaps never a reason. On the other hand, it's great to see you.
it's good to see everybody. Yeah.
It's really quite astonishing to think of the years that have passed and the adventures pertaining thereto.
I miss Vinta Taney also, so that's your base.
Me too.
I was sorry we stopped doing our meetings there.
Yeah. It was grand.
Yes, I got the opportunity to go to Bentatene once. It was incredible. Definitely helped brainwash me as a World Federalist.
Shape and form you, Nick.
That's right. Yes.
Yes. As one of those who did not get to stay in one of the fancier hotels on Bentatene, along with some of the other World Federalists, I shared a room with Lois Wilson, and we had a whole octopus on toast at our meals. But I just spoke with her on through FaceTime on Wednesday night, and she will be 97 on April 8th.
Well, we do give her my deepest love and appreciation for all she did.
I will.
And
I mean, I really wish the WFM Canada and the other WFMs would write up about some of the extraordinary people that you all have been over the years that have been participating in this. I mean, I remember Lloyd Axworthy's interventions with the U.S. and others in Rome on the last day when the treaty was adopted. You all had a Secretary General of WFM in the late 60s and early 70s.
Andy Clark.
I can't remember his name at the
Andy
moment.
Clark.
Pardon?
Andy Clark.
And Andy Clark, right? And,
Yeah.
you know, and I don't know where his archives and stuff are, but those things would, you know, were very, very important. I think he was there at the time when WFM sponsored this lunch when Outant was going away, where unbelievable people came to that. U.S. Supreme Court justices, Judy Collins, John Lennon played Imagine on a guitar. I mean, it was an extraordinary appreciation lunch for Outant in 1971 as he was finishing the term. So it was, you know, we have a lot of wonderful history to celebrate.
We do.
Yes, and if everyone's settled in, we'll hear now from our the man of the hour, Fergus Watt. Lots of wonderful history there, I'm sure. All right.
Well, I'll alternate between the camera and,
Well, yeah, there's
Yeah.
two cameras. Oh,
yeah. Well, thank you, Nick, and to Alex for organizing this. You know, when I see this World Federalist Conference, which is kind of becoming an annual thing now, I'm reminded, you know, with seeing the way it's organized, hybrid, and you know, this is one of the reasons it was time for me to step down, to pass the reins to a younger generation. The ebbs and flows of a movement like the World Federalists, it doesn't correspond with so much with political need as it does with marketing and communications technologies. We may have built the organization up a little bit through the 80s and 90s and early 2000s with direct mail and so on, but you know, the world is doing business in different ways now, and it's great to see that the Canadian World Federalists are continuing to thrive and reach out to others around the world with events like this. And thank you all, you know, friends, and there's even a few family members who are on the call. And thank you, Jim. Your memory is much better than mine, but that's a low bar. And one of the things that I've always said to people in the World Federalist Movement is that it's important for us to have fun. And so, of course, I threw the buns and the calamari with Nick. What else were we going to do? Bill Pace, yeah, no one in the movement has taught me more than Bill Pace. Honestly, sometimes there were years when as Canadian World Federalists, we didn't really need to develop a program. We just had to follow what our international secretariat was doing, and that's what we did. So, you know, I as someone who I became the Executive Director of WFM-Canada in 1985. So I don't know where Jim gets this 43 years, but I'm counting about 36 or so, because I left in 2021, which is a long time. And I have friends, many of whom you know, I do have friends who don't quite get it about world federalism, and you know, some of my soccer buddies or others might ask me, you know, what is it about, you know, why do you still have the same job? What do you know? And my sort of smart aleck reply is that, well, my job didn't change, but the world did. And that's of course true. I think what I want to talk about here is how we kind of curate and marshal our ideas as World Federalists. We're in possession of an important set of ideas, and just how we go about the business of practicing world federalism matters if we're going to have some measure of success. I feel a little awkward, you know, as the company bureaucrat for all these years, being the center of attention at this event. But I will take a moment to to say that just a couple of personal remarks. And as you know, as someone who quite happily toiled away for all these years, it's not always easy. Yes, bingo. We even ran a few bingos. We'll do anything to stay in business, but it's one of these jobs that's a certain amount of inspiration and a certain amount of perspiration. But I want to say that none of us do this alone. And for me, I'm very grateful for the support of my family and from Michelle, who's here all these years. So it's something I think about at a time like this. When I was a kid, and I think there's one or two of my sisters on the call who might remember this. There was a poster in our. We lived in an old farmhouse in southern Ontario, and there was as you walk down the stairs, there was this poster with a bunch of purple and pink and orange monkeys and a bunch of pulleys and wires and things going every which way, and the caption at the bottom of the poster said, "Ideas don't work unless we do." And so that's what I mean about as World Federalists, it's one thing to have a great idea about how the world can or might be organized, but it takes work and organization. I'm one of those who subscribes to the some of the ideas that Steven Pinker writes about. Maybe some of you have read his book about the better angels of our nature, and why violence has declined is the subtitle, and his central thesis is fairly simple, but a lot of people don't buy it. The idea is that humanity has become increasingly less violent over the centuries and will continue to do so. And Pinker is aware that many people instinctively believe the opposite. The daily headlines, etc. But what his book and what is, if you haven't read it, I recommend it, is that he demonstrates quite convincingly that we're that human society is becoming more civilized, less violent, better ordered, and that there is a direction in history in the favor of integration, progressive development of the rule of law, and of reason and social justice. And so as World Federalists, this is, of course, good news. But as World Federalists, we also, as we think about our ideals and our principles, and just to be clear, I mean, in terms of definitions, we are at a World Federalist Conference, and I would define World Federalism as the application of the principles of democratic federalism to global affairs, which means that a recognition of the division of political authority between various constituencies and democratic practice and the rule of law. But those are still very broad principles, and how we apply them takes a certain amount of judgment and And that's what Bill Pace was so great at over the years. And as World Federalists, I mean, we need to always keep in mind that, and this is part of what Steven Pinker writes about, is that it's progress. We are making progress. It's gradual, though. It's not going to happen all at once, and World Federalists need to keep that in mind. I'm not reading any of this, by the way. I should have brought my glasses. But I think I'm catching the main points. It's another way to look back. There are two sort of oh great, are these? Yeah, no,
You're in the right place.
that's okay. That's okay.
Number are you looking for? They're probably in the room.
Yeah, it's okay. I think I'm covering it. There was two sort of ideas that I had about reflecting on the years I've had, and I'm still grateful to be able to to have a career doing something that I truly believe in. One way is to measure progress according to some of the political and normative developments. And when we look back, I mean, I do have some old computer files and other files. Andy Clark's archives are where they should be with our World Federalist archivists, but I do have some of my own personal files, and I can, there are some yeah. Some of the vernacular and the terminology of global politics and the way it's evolved is reflective of some of the progress that we've seen, that I believe we're a part of I mean, we're a small part, we're a small movement, but we do sometimes play our cards right and network strategically and coalesce with others in order to push things in the right direction. And some of the terms of global politics that are common currency now weren't when I started. I mean, Christine Perringer is here, and when we encountered the World Federalists in the early 1980s, it was a time when there was a modern disarmament movement, but the World Federalist Office was not a robust place. There was a membership staff person who was turning over memberships and not much else in the way of program, but engaging with some of those social movements and using terms like common security, which became a big buzzword in those days. And Christine was working on disarmament and development and the linkages between issues and so on. And later, Lloyd Axworthy co-opted, one might say, a framework of human security that was also instrumental, and the International Criminal Court was an example of a human security an example par excellence. The idea that you could have a global court that creates a criminal jurisdiction for individuals, including world leaders and generals when they commit the most grievous crimes. So international justice, the idea of sustainable development was was not part of international parlance until I think the watershed moment was the 1987 Brundtland Report. And you know, we're still struggling. We're still struggling with what this means. You know, sustainable, what is sustainability? It's living within planetary boundaries. Well, how do you live within planetary boundaries when your most important international treaty on climate change creates global goals and then leaves it up to all of the 193 contracting parties to decide what they're going to do to meet those goals? So, you know, these governance challenges are still with us in terms of how we meet these sustainability principles, but at least the principles are established, and with the sustainable development goals, and you can see the evolution, but you can also see that there's much more that needs to be done. So, you know, common security, international justice, sustainability, even the term global governance is now, you know, well, like John Packer knows the, you know, well, the trajectory of things like global governance in the halls of academia, and it's I mean, when we got involved in an active way with the World Federalists, I mean, some of the leadership at that time were people like Hannah Newcomb and Norman Alcock, who, you know, whose work in peace research came at an enormous personal cost. I mean, you know, you couldn't really talk about it in those days. And I mean, Norman was on RCMP lists. They didn't have CSIS yet, but you know, it was ridiculous. And now terms like peace building are you know, part of global politics. The UN has a peace building commission. So what I'm suggesting is that I guess I've been grinding away at this for a while, that I have the benefit of some experience that you know, and what's left of my memory that allows one to look back and see that humanity is and is making progress despite, you know, the headlines of the day, and you know, it's Gaza or Ukraine and so on. But we need to take the longer view and take a step back, and that's what we try and do as World Federalists. And I really appreciated hearing from Karen and Jim, and I had included in my remarks to mention them along with some of the others who were really instrumental for me over the years, including the third member of our ecumenical mafia, I would call them, and that's the great Lois Wilson, who was so much fun to work with as a president. And there was when Lois was leading the World Federalists as president, she sent a message and said, "You're going to hear an announcement about me in the news. Don't worry about it. I can still, you know, nothing's going to change. I'll still be the president and so on. But, you know, just heads up kind of thing." And soon after, she was named a senator. Once there was, you know, so this is, I mean, Doug Roche had cornered the market on how to use a Senate appointment to advance your peace advocacy, but Lois also worked hard as a senator, and we'd have meetings up on her office on the Hill. One day in about April, I was you could drive on Parliament Hill in those days. This was pre 9/11, and so I was late, and there'd been a snowstorm, and I drove right up on Parliament Hill, and I couldn't, you know, I was late, and I was just going to take my chances and park behind East Block, and So I did, and as soon as I got out of the car, an RCMP officer got up and got in behind me and stopped me right there and said, you know, after taking my license, he said, you know, Mr. Watt, you were speeding. The wrong way on a one-way street on Parliament Hill. In a snowstorm, and I said, well, I'm very sorry, I'm late for an appointment with Senator Wilson, and he let me off. I'm telling this story in part just to tease my wife, because not 1 week later, Michelle got so I got no ticket after doing all of this, and 1 week later, Michelle got a ticket for ignoring a stop sign on her bicycle during Bicycle Safety Week. Anyway, I'm digressing. Lois was just too much fun. I really enjoyed those meetings, and we in the World Federalist Canada, we at some point we changed our constitution to attract well-known presidents, and there were many. I mean, Karen and Jim is, you know, was well known in those circles he travels in, and but there were other, you know, Canadian political figures that I really enjoyed working with. I'll mention Alan Blakeney in particular. I mean, Douglas Roche, working with him over the years, not as a president of the World Federalists, but just you can't not keep interacting with Doug Roche over the years, if you're in the peace movement, and the great Warren Almond, who, you know, we just, you know, couldn't get rid of him as president. He was with us. We were bending the rules to keep him on board, and he was just a lot of fun, and someone who, for Warren, I mean, the Universal Declaration and rights were his guide star in politics, and if the primacy of rights and the need to extend our global human rights machinery were what animated Warren's vision of world federalism, and there aren't many better visions. But so it's a great concoction of peaceniks, people like Murray Thompson and Dieter Heinrich, Walter Dorn. I mean, I don't want to. I'm missing people, I know that, but I just the kind of people you meet in the World Federalists are different. Let's say they're different in a couple of ways. I mean, the quirky way, the geeky way, is that you know, your garden variety World Federalist is a bit too much of a, you know, veering into legalisms and constitutionalisms. And if you ever want to, you know, if you want to sideline the World Federalist Movement, just introduce a proposed amendment to our bylaws. The World Federalists will go, you know, their brains will explode, dealing with, you know, believing that by fixing our constitution and our bylaws, we're somehow changing the world. But you know, knowing that the rule of law matters, and being conversant with you know, treaties and governance and laws and so on. I mean, that's it comes with the territory. But by and large, you know, World Federalists and not just the people I've mentioned, but all friends here and online are people who are just a lot of fun to work with. I mean, it takes a certain kind of person to believe enough in the oneness of humanity and the possibility of human progress to sign up for world federalism, that you get a bunch of people that it's great to have a beer with, or even some vodka on a bad plane, as Jim remembers. So I guess I haven't really talked much about what I'm doing now. I mean, I left the organization in 2021, and this Summit of the Future is coming. It's a project we can. I mean, Monique and I got this thing started when we raised some money for just an idea. You know, at the UN, they don't really let anniversaries go to waste, and so 75 years was 2020, and so in 2017 we started a UN 2020 campaign, and we got lucky. Let's be honest about that. I mean, the call for a strengthened UN came at a time when Donald Trump was defunding the UN again and wreaking havoc as he did, and hopefully won't do again, in terms of the effectiveness of the UN. So when a few NGOs showed up, knocking on ambassadors' doors saying we should try and make something more than a birthday party out of 2020, there were a lot of small and middle power governments that bought into that, and lo and behold, when the time came, the declaration mandated a Secretary General's report, and that report has turned into a summit, which is going to happen in September 2024, and so that little effort that Monique and I started has obviously grown into an NGO coalition, and hopefully the coalition for the UN we need will survive the summit and continue. My best people. One of my unanswered emails is a request from Meta Spencer. You've probably got more than one of those too, Robin, but for an article on the Summit of the Future, she wants to know from the NGOs who are working on it what this summit is going to do for the world, and I haven't answered her email because I haven't got a clue. I mean, we have our advocacy. Yeah, so we're at a very fluid time is my main point in global politics, and things, a little UN campaign is not immune from that. In fact, that's the reason why, or part of the reason why it's impossible to say what this summit is going to bring. The global order that was created after the Second World War and led by the United States is shifting, and we're moving to a multipolar world, no doubt about that. Just how we move and in what way, and there's numerous ways that we could fall into disaster. Hopefully the change will be a managed political process, and that will continue to make this slow, gradual progress that I believe we've made as an international community, I guess, for these many years. So I think maybe anything more about the Coalition for the UN We Need and the Summit of the Future this September might have to wait for another conference or another meeting. But I'll just leave it there. And just so to recap, I am able to read the last page of this. Firstly, Stephen Pinker is right. We are making progress, but it's gradual, but we're winning. Secondly, we need to be about world federalism and in a measured, step-by-step way. It's a long haul, and we need to do it obviously in the company of others, and including coalitions, networks, but also, having fun as we do it along the way. And finally, I should say that we are, and I think I said this earlier, but we're stronger together. And so the politics of consensus, consultation, collaboration, we need to practice that as an organization. But let's not neglect the organization. This is where I should really do as Nick did and remind everyone of the importance of the organization and the QR code. It's important to sustain this, the basics of an organization. We wouldn't, many of us wouldn't be here if we didn't know that we can do more together than we can individually. So it's good to and you don't have to donate every day, but at least once a year, it would be great. And if we can do what we can, that's always appreciated. And finally, I just want to thank Nick and others Christine and Patricia, who had to leave, who've contributed to this event. I'm very grateful, and it's a little awkward, but I am grateful for having had the opportunity to just for today, but to reflect on the opportunity I've had as to make a career out of working for a cause that I will always believe in. So this has been special for me. Let's all carry on.
That was great, Fergus. Yeah, exceptional. So yeah, also thanks to Karen, Cam, and Robin, who also put in some work into organizing this event. But now I think we'd like to go to Fergus's successor. You're wondering who is running the organization now. Is a very talented new executive director, who I hope he's not too tired from a full day of conferences, that he can give us some remarks. If Alex, are you online, Alex?
Yes, I am.
Here we go. Okay, great. Over to you.
Thank you so much. And I don't want to take away from Fergus's moment today. So I'm going to keep it quite brief, but I want to thank Fergus as well for all his efforts and his help in my coming onto the role as executive director. it seems strange to me that it was a bit over 2.5 years ago. So it's almost been 3 years, which is not even a tenth of how long Fergus has been in the role. So I do look forward to many years of being with the World Federalist Movement Canada, and I do learn every day and still here and there give a call to Fergus to ask him for advice on different matters, sometimes about board meetings, how to approach different organizations, our standing, and especially for contacts, which have all helped magnificently to support the World Federalist Conference that we had today. I also want to thank all the 227 registrants, not all of whom are here today, but it is only day one, and it is, as Nick mentioned, the end of day one. We are all a bit tired after a long day of presentations and different speakers, but we are definitely looking forward to tomorrow, which will be day 2 of the conference. So we have another full 6 hours tomorrow to go through the UNPA simulation, and we'll have a fun little trivia. So if you're interested in either observing or participating in the simulation, it is not too late to join. And once again, congratulations, Fergus. I'm sorry it took so long to have your retirement celebration. As noted, it's been about 2.5 years, a bit too long, but because of COVID, I think we all understand. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining. I'm going to close off the conference today, and yeah, have a wonderful rest of your day.